Did you have a good day? I really hope you did. Now it's time. Your teeth are brushed, right? It's time to go to sleep. And what we're going to read to you tonight is the story of Pinocchio, a puppet who wanted to become a young man. One night, the evening star shone down on a tiny village. So you know it wasn't satanic because Lucifer is the morning star. So the evening star just has to be the opposite. But only one house still had a light burning, and that was the workshop of Geppetto, a kindly old wood carver. He was busy carving a little puppet. Why was he carving these puppets? Because it was his passion. He had a hobby, he had a business, and he enjoyed what he was doing. Now, while he was talking to himself because he was halfway crazy and his wife had died, so they couldn't have kids of their own, but he still kept good spirits, as you should when you fall on hard times. Isn't Pinocchio almost like a real boy? He chuckled. Yes, he was almost, but not quite. The hormone therapy had not yet kicked in. Climbing into bed, the old man mumbled, I wish you were a real boy, Pinocchio. And Jiminy Cricket, who's this character? Why was he lurking in the shadows? Had he been dropping eaves while trimming the verge? Either way, this is actually a good character. He overheard Geppetto's wish. He had seen how kind and gentle Geppetto was, and he felt sorry because the lonely old man's wish could never come true. His salmon had stopped swimming upstream long ago. The only love in his heart was for a child to love. Don't get any ideas, Maps. Suddenly, a shimmering light filled the room, and a beautiful lady, dressed in shining blue, appeared. Are you an angel? The deep space pilots talk about them. She raised her wand, and when she said, Wake, Pinocchio! Skip and run! Good Geppetto needs a son. Pinocchio blinked his eyes, the wooden puppet. He raised his wooden arms. He had never walked before, so it was almost like a newborn fawn out of a deer's pussy. I can move, he cried. I'm a real boy. No, the blue fairy said sadly. You have life, but to become a real boy, you must prove yourself brave, truthful, and unselfish. And Jiminy Cricket would help. So, what she means by this, and the whole point of this story, is basically adolescence, going through puberty and becoming a true upstanding citizen, an actual man. That's the whole point of Pinocchio's story. And love started it all. Just like when me and your mama, we locked the doors for a reason. The next morning, Geppetto couldn't believe his eyes. He rolled out of bed. He took his CPAP machine off, breathed the fresh air, stopped the sleep apnea, woke up bright eyed, bushy tailed, and bushy mustached, and couldn't believe what he was seeing. There was his puppet, laughing and talking and running. And since it was a boy, it didn't talk too much, but little boys run a lot. They've got a lot of energy to expel. It's true, father, Pinocchio cried. I'm alive. After the initial joy was over and the initial shock, Geppetto said, But now, Pinocchio, you must go to school, study hard. Then you'll soon become a real boy. Now, how do you think Geppetto knew the rules? Was he told by the succubus, the blue fairy? We actually don't know. Was she actually birthed from the fairy because Geppetto finally took some Viagra? Anyway, you'll learn about that later. Meanwhile, Jiminy Cricket had overslept and now jumped up in a great hurry. He caught up with Pinocchio just as the silly little puppet was walking off with the worst pair of scoundrels in the whole countryside. Furries. J. Worthington, Foulfellow, and Gideon. These villains convinced Pinocchio that he should forget about school and become an actor, as all of Hollywood does. They learn nothing except what they are told. They parrot it out like sheep, and that's not what you want to be. You need to actually have an education, especially if you develop viewpoints that you are staunch in and want to be able to substantiate those claims in an argument with fucking retards. So, school is the way you should go. Don't skip class. But, Pinocchio, cried Jiminy, what will your father say? And Pinocchio just answered, Father will be proud of me. And the reason he thought this is because he didn't have any home training. He thought that if he made it rich, famous, if he was lauded, all those kind of things, that Geppetto would be proud. He'd have a son where on his deathbed he'd be like, my boy did good. He done well. Because Geppetto knew about school, but he couldn't afford it because he's a poor ass motherfucker. Soon, though, they came to a marionette theater, and when its owner Stromboli saw Pinocchio, his small, evil eyes glistened, even though he was a fat cock. What a drawing card, he exclaimed. A puppet without strings. Basically, like the youth of today, which is why you're not going to be that. This is a tale of woe. This is a cautionary tale, and why I'm telling you. The fox nodded. And he's yours, he said, smiling greedily, baring his teeth, holding out his paw. More chickens for a certain price, of course. That night, Pinocchio sang and danced. The audience cheered for more. A puppet without strings. It was a miracle. It was like CGI. Before they even had toothpaste. But when Pinocchio started to head home for the night, Stromboli snarled at him, You're mine, and you stay here. And bang! Before Pinocchio could resist, he was locked in a birdcage for public display. And this was when the reality hit Pinocchio. What have I done? I've sold my soul. This is why you should be based. This is what I'm teaching you to do. Stand up for yourself. Develop your own arguments, your own agreements and disagreements, and be able to back them up. But every time, or every once in a while, we do screw up. And always be willing to learn from the other side or just another point of view. But he did learn the hard way, which is why sometimes you have to pick out which switch for corporal punishment. Oh, Jimmy, Pinocchio sobbed. Why didn't I go to school? I'll never see my father again. And suddenly, the blue fairy, which I posit might very well could be his mom, because look at that dumper. I'll help you this time, she said, because you are truly sorry. Run home now, Pinocchio, and be a good son, or you'll never become a real boy. So that's the lesson that she taught him. He was actually contrite. And so she's like, okay, you know what? First time you make a mistake, now you learn a lesson. You know not to do that thing again. Whew! Pinocchio sighed thankfully. Let's go home. And he and Jiminy started running as fast as they could. Why did Jiminy not pick the lock? Bro's small as crap. He could have just gotten in there and wiggled something around. He and Jiminy started running as fast as they could. But whom should they bump into but Foulfellow and Gideon, the furries? Now, this time, Furry Fox persuaded the gullible puppet to forget his good resolutions and take a rest cure on Pleasure Island. Now, Pinocchio, I know this story is about puberty, but he had not yet experienced it. So, yeah, his hormones weren't necessarily flowing just yet, but don't worry, they will with you soon, and it will be a nightmare on everyone involved. But you have a stable family, so it's gonna be okay. We lean on each other. Jiminy cried, "You promised to go right home. But Foulfellow says I need a rest after my terrible experience." That's what Pinocchio said in retort. He just couldn't handle the fact that he was easily manipulated. He had only spent one morning with Geppetto, so even though there was a father figure to go back home to, he wasn't around very much. Pinocchio went out for cigarettes. Geppetto didn't. They came to a coach bound for Pleasure Island because, you see, he had been sold into slavery. It was pulled by small donkeys and filled with noisy boys, like all boys. As Pinocchio climbed aboard, Jiminy saw the evil looking coachman slip Foulfellow a heavy bag. Again, the fox had sold him. It was a Ponzi scheme. And this is also one of the big reasons why we abolish slavery, because this is just not right. You can't do this to someone you care about. But he didn't care. He saw him as an item and not as an individual. And even if you disagree with individuals, you should still treat them that way. They have their own thoughts, their own passions, their own ways of thinking, unless they're trans. After boarding a ferry, the coach docked at Pleasure Island. Here, our streets were paved with cookies and fountains spouted lemonade. Pinocchio made friends with a young bully called Lampwick, who was always in the middle of mischief. Because you got to go tromping around out in the woods. You got to go get into stuff. The only way you learn is by doing. Jiminy was not happy, although he had been watching the whole time. He didn't seem to do anything about it. He was just kind of watching, like a spy. He shouted at the puppet to go home, only after Pinocchio had been doing all this stuff for quite a while. "Don't tell me you're scared of a beetle," Lampwick snickered. And Jiminy was about to march off because he got butthurt when all of a sudden Lampwick and Pinocchio groaned. It's like something was in their tummies. It's like, I don't know. It just, they felt a little bit wrong. Like maybe we need to go to the doctor. But it was even worse. The boys were sprouting donkey ears. And Jiminy had apparently seen this before, but had let it go on for so long that he was too late. But if he had seen this before, why did he not speak up earlier? This is the question. A turn of heart is always good if it's in the right direction. But you should have warned him. "It's donkey fever," whispered Jiminy, horrified. "You were lazy, good for nothing boys, so you're turning into donkeys." Like I said before, he can berate them now, but he never warned them in the past. He let it go on for way too long. And this is what happens. You turn into an asshole. They quickly dashed through the streets, and as they rounded a corner, they saw the coachman herding a bunch of braying donkeys, many of which still wore hats and shorts. They didn't know what was going on, but they would soon find out that all the kids that they were having fun with and doing debauchery with, they had all turned to donkeys. This was all a scam and a plot. So you should always be very wary of anyone with bushy eyebrows. Pinocchio and Jiminy managed to climb up the wall surrounding the island, but Lampwick had already turned full-fledged into a donkey. Pinocchio was still only halfway there. There was nothing they could do to save him. And with a lump in his throat, which we call an Adam's apple, Pinocchio followed Jiminy and dove into the sea to escape. He would soon become waterlogged, but he would float without having to breathe. They had a long and hard journey home because Jiminy Cricket's his little insect legs were just kicking up a storm like he was trying to paddle. It took a long time because you can't really get that much momentum off of those little tiny things. But he was trying. Any effort is good effort to get away from something as crazy as that. By the time they came to the village, they did make it. And thankfully, Pinocchio didn't have to eat, so or drink water because the seawater would have ultimately killed him. You shouldn't drink salt water. But we're going off on a tangent. They hurried to Geppetto's door and pounded on it. But the house was empty. Where was Geppetto? Where was surrogate father? And just as they did that, a gust of wind blew a piece of paper around the corner, and Jiminy exclaimed, "Hey, Pinocchio, it's a letter!" And this was written from Geppetto. When did Pinocchio learn to read, though? Because he never went to school. He went one time and he got sidetracked. Anyway, dear Pinocchio, I heard you had gone to Pleasure Island, so Figaro, Cleo, and I started off on a small boat to find you. Just as we came in sight of the island, out of the sea rose Monstro, the giant whale. He opened his jaws, in we went. Now, dear son, we are living in the belly of the whale. But there's very little to eat here, and we cannot exist much longer, so I fear you will never again see your loving father, Geppetto. Post office went hard back in the day. They could deliver mail from the belly of a whale. Oh my, this is why these are fairy tales. For a while, both Jiminy and Pinocchio were silent, too sad to speak. The only true father figure he had ever found or had ever known was quite possibly dead. Then Pinocchio, he gathered his umbrage. He stood tall and said, "I'm going to save my father." And just then, a dove wearing a golden crown appeared like the Holy Spirit. But it was a girl, so it couldn't be the Holy Spirit. "I will take you," she said. "Climb on." Then she spread her wings and flew until they reached the seashore. She didn't take him to the whale, she just dropped him off at the beach. Pinocchio and Jiminy did not know that the dove was the blue fairy in disguise. Oh, so it was his mother. And that it was she who had brought them Geppetto's letter. So I take everything back. The post office sucks. And it always has. Except when it was the Pony Express. But that's to be expected. I'll teach you about that later whenever you're in probably second or third grade. When the dove was out of sight, Pinocchio tied a big stone to his donkey tail. Then he and Jiminy leapt off the cliff into the ocean below. Which one cannonballed and which one did a perfect 900 backflip? As soon as they reached the sandy bottom, Pinocchio scrambled to his feet. "Come on," he said, "let's find Monstro." "We'll never find him," muttered Jiminy. "Also, I can't swim because I'm black. We're probably looking in the wrong ocean." Because they don't connect in real life. All the oceans connect. They're just called different things. This bitch don't know about Pangea. But Jiminy was wrong because he too was uneducated and spent a lot of time on porches. Very near them floated the whale that they were looking for, fast asleep. And inside the whale, they found Geppetto. And he was fishing. I don't know why he was fishing, though, because most of the time, whales just are bottom feeders that eat krill and those are extremely small shrimpies. He had set up a crude home from the ships the whale had swallowed, and every day he fished in the whale's belly. But no fish came in. Not a bite for days. Well, what happened to the two people that he got swallowed with? Did he eat them? I would be completely behind that decision. Darwinism, baby. If Monstro doesn't wake soon, we'll all starve. Why don't you just stab his guts, make him throw up? That's what I would do. If you ever swallow something, immediately purge it. Just then, Geppetto felt a nibble. Food, Figaro, he cried. But when the catch was landed, it was only a cookbook called How to Cook Fish. Why was Figaro not scrounging around? These are the questions. Because you could eat the dogs if you're Asian. It was a solemn moment. All felt that the end was near, and then the whale moved. Monstro gave an upward lunge, and through his jaws rushed a wall of water, and with it came fish, a whole school of tuna. A giant wave of only thoughts came through. Pinocchio saw Monstro coming at him. He held onto a fish, and he was eaten too with it. Pinocchio was a simp. This is basically what we're saying, and the only reason why I'm saying this is because it's kind of in the news right now. So soon, Geppetto was fishing for wooden boys, and this is where the story takes a dark turn. But instead of going down the real story, we will tell you this fabricated story. He was pulling fish after fish out of the water. He wasn't eating them raw, even though he could, depending on what type of fish it was. Geppetto, I think he's German, actually. He had no idea about sushi and how you can just chomp it off that way. It's actually better if you do it fresh out of the sea. I'll teach you that. He was so busy he almost didn't notice that Pinocchio got pulled on board. Oh, my dear son, he exclaimed. Is it really you? They were thrilled to see each other again. Again for the first time. Technically the second. Pinocchio had a plan. And what was his plan? The plan was to set fire to a pile of crates. Because arson helps you out of any situation. And as the fire began to smoke, they jumped onto a raft, even though the raft was halfway on fire too. But don't worry, the salt water would have put that out. As soon as they sailed off, and soon the whale gave a monstrous sneeze from all the smoke that was clogging up his nostrils. And out went the raft, and out past his crunching jaws, and into the open sea. But they were not yet free, because Monstro plunged after them and splintered their raft. He just wouldn't let them get away. He didn't really want to do anything to them, but this is kind of the story that Pinocchio is going through. He's always been caged, he's always been trapped, and everything in the world will want to trap you. It's just whether or not you have the wherewithal to fight back against it. Otherwise, you would be caged and never fight back. This is a story about fighting back, finding your true meaning. Geppetto was sinking though after the raft crashed, and he cried out, "My son, save yourself." But Hold the Doro didn't realize that just how Leonardo DiCaprio could have saved himself from the Titanic raft, from the Titanic crash, where they're basically using a door as a raft. Just get on the door. Hold on to the door. Save yourself. We can both fit on this. Pinocchio is still made of wood, so he naturally floats. So save yourself, nigga. But the brave puppet kept him afloat as giant waves swept across the shore. Geppetto lay on the beach, gratitude filling his heart, and then he saw Pinocchio lying beside him, still, cold, and pale, much like a plank of wood, much like my baby girl, Tay-Tay's ass. The old man was heartbroken because they had gone through so much together. He had wished and hoped for so long. And then after everything they went through, he still came out the other side empty handed. Or did he, though? But that's not what happened. There's a bright spot at the end of this. Geppetto gathered poor Pinocchio into his arms and he headed home. And he did what we always do every single day and before dinner. He prayed. And sometimes that's all it takes when you don't have the answers. Sometimes you just need to pray about it. Suddenly, a ray of starlight appeared. A soft voice said, "And someday, when you have proven yourself brave, truthful, and unselfish, you will be a real boy." Pinocchio sat up. He looked at himself. He felt his arms and legs. He noticed a little bit of scrounge up underneath his nutsack. And he knew. "Father, look at me," he cried joyfully. "I now get to learn how to shave." Which will, thank goodness you come from half Indian blood, because that is extremely annoying to have to shave all the time. The blue fairy's promise had come true. Pinocchio was a real live boy. And this is the reason why he became a real live boy, because he stopped thinking so much about himself and instead cared about others around him, especially his father. Honor thy father and thy mother. Have a great night. Sleep sweet and have great dreams.